So today we're going to be continuing our conversation about the structure and function of macromolecules. From our last video, we looked at how carbohydrates are formed, different types of carbohydrates, and the structure and function of each of those types of carbohydrates. Today, we're going to be moving into our next topic, which is proteins. So here is our format. And again, we're going to be looking specifically at those protein macromolecules, the structure and function of proteins. When I hear the word protein, I think of meat. Okay, that's why this picture is on here. But proteins are so much more than just meat. They are the most structurally and functionally diverse groups of our biomolecules. Their functions are that they are involved in almost everything. And I'm going to show you a bunch of those functions as we move through the next couple of slides. So one of the functions of a protein is an enzyme. So enzymes are made of proteins. What an enzyme does is it allows for a chemical reaction to take place. In this picture that's on here, we're looking at how digestive enzymes will catalyze the hydrolysis of bonds in food molecules. So let's say that you ate a starch. Your body has enzymes that allow those starch molecules to break apart so that you can have those glucose monomers that your body can use for cellular respiration. Another example is storage proteins. So an example of that would be casein. Casein is a protein that's found in milk. It's a major source of amino acids for baby animals. Plants also have storage proteins in their seeds. And then one of the most unique places that you can find proteins or a protein source is actually an egg white. Because think about the fact that the whole embryo that's inside the egg develops from the yolk. So the whites actually contain all 20 amino acids that are essential. Another function of a protein is a hormone. So for example, insulin's a protein hormone. Insulin triggers glucose uptake into your cells so that your blood sugar can be regulated. Another example is for movement. So you have contractile and motor proteins, you have actin and myosin that allow your muscle fibers to move. And we're going to look at that in more detail as we move through the year. We also have defensive proteins, also known as antibodies. Antibodies will basically flag anything that's foreign and allow for that flagged foreign invader to be destroyed by your body's immune system. Transport proteins, hemoglobin is an example of transport protein. Hemoglobin carries the oxygen throughout your blood. We have receptor proteins. So there's a couple of ways that you have these function. Receptor proteins are found on the outside of your cells, embedded in your cell membrane, and they can be signaled by something called a ligand to allow something to enter into the cell or for something to happen to that cell. They also provide support in terms of the fact that they can be structural proteins, so things like keratin and collagen, which are found in our hair and in our skin, are examples of structural or supportive proteins. And that's the list of all of the functions that proteins can have. So again, they are extremely diverse in terms of their function and in their structure. So let's look at the actual structure of a protein. So the monomer of your protein is going to be your amino acid. You heard that term before? I'm sure you have. We're going to look at those in more detail. So there are 4 components around your central carbon for every single amino acid. You have a hydrogen. You have an amino group, which is the N with the 3 H's. You have your carboxyl group or your carboxylic acid group, which is the COOH. In this picture, you'll notice that the H's have the positive and then the COO has the negative. What's happened is that the carboxyl group actually donated a proton to the amino group. So you have a negative end and you have a positive end now. And then you'll see this R group. The R group is the only portion of an amino acid that varies. So every amino acid, we have 20 amino acids. Every amino acid has a hydrogen, an amino, and a carboxyl group. The R group is what varies. And then think about the name of amino acid. Amino comes from the amino group. Acid comes from the carboxyl or carboxylate group. So that's another way that you can remember the structure of an amino acid. These are the 20 amino acids. This is a comprehensive list in terms of the types of amino acids that you'll see. There are a couple of them that are essential amino acids, and then the rest of them are non-essential amino acids. And we'll talk about what that means on the next slide. Okay, so the ones that I have boxed for you in pink are what we call essential amino acids. Essential means that your body does not make them. So you have to get them from your food sources. The other 11, your body does make. And you'll notice that they're broken up into a variety of groups. And we're going to look at each of those groups specifically. So, like I mentioned, each amino acid has specific properties, and it is because of the variable R group that they have. The R group on here is what's in the light blue. So these are your hydrophilic amino acids because their R groups or their side chains are polar. So they're going to be water loving. Our nonpolar side chains make our amino acids hydrophobic. So you'll notice that a majority of those R groups, which are in yellow on this picture, contain carbons and hydrogens. And if we think back, our carbon-hydrogen bond is nonpolar. So that generates our nonpolar amino acids. And then we also have electrically charged amino acids, which makes them, again, hydrophilic, right? If we create positive and negative, they're attracted to water. So you'll see that you have two acids, aspartic acid and glutamic acid, that have that negative charge. Again, they've donated a proton. Remember, acids are proton donors. So they've given up a hydrogen, and it makes them have a negative charge. Your bases, lysine, arginine, and histidine, have a positive charge because their amino group that's on there has accepted that hydrogen from the acidic amino acids. So these are going to be your positively charged amino acids. And you'll notice one's negative, one's positive. Maybe there's going to be some attraction between the two at some point. When we build proteins, the process of polymerization of a protein, we create peptide bonds between each of these amino acid monomers. And the reason they're called peptide bonds is because our long polymer is a polypeptide. So you'll notice that you have two amino acids. Do you see the OH on one and the H on the other? What does that make? That makes water. So dehydration synthesis, again, the polymerization of any of these macromolecules is dehydration synthesis. That process will occur to allow us to link together those two amino acids to give you a, in this case, dipeptide and the formation of a peptide bond. So you have two ends. You have your N terminus, which is your NH2N, and you have your C terminus, which is your COOH end. Whenever these polypeptides are being made, you can only add them in one direction. You can't have two different ends where you're adding different amino acids. They can only grow in one direction. When you see your polypeptide chain, you'll also see a repetition of NCC, NCC, NCC in terms of that backbone that's being created. And like I mentioned, it only grows in one direction. So I'm going to let Mr. Anderson show you how proteins are made.
So let's kind of see how they're put together. And so when I build proteins inside my body, I'm doing that with amino acids. And we use that as something called a dehydration synthesis to do that. And so let me move this one over here. Basically what we do is we position one amino acid right next to an amino acid. You can see here that there is two hydrogens and an oxygen here. And you know that in chemistry, if we have two hydrogens, H2O, that's simply a water. And so what we can do is we can lose that water. Now, it's not as simple as that. This whole thing sits inside a ribosome, so there's a giant enzyme around the outside of it. But let's attach another one. So now we bring another one right next to it. You can see that the hydroxyl group or the carboxyl group is attaching into the hydrogen. We're going to lose a water, and then we're going to form another covalent bond. And then we put another one next to it. We lose another water. We form a covalent bond. And we do that again And now we have what's called a polypeptide. So each of these individually are called a peptide, but if we attach them all together, we have a polypeptide. And you can see that the strand across the top looks the same. It looks uniform, but the only thing that's going to be different in each of these is going to be the R group that trails off the bottom.
So Mr. Anderson showed you how proteins are being built, again, how it's growing in one direction. You have your NCC backbone, and then you just have your R groups that are going to dictate to you the shape that a molecule of our protein molecule is going to take on, which we will talk more about in our next segment.